Hello and welcome to the Sports News Blitz podcast, which is brought to you by the Sports News Blitz website. Today I'm back with Sam, who is going to be the co-host again today after a little week off. How Sam? How have you been?
Yeah, good. Just been a new job, which has been much less enjoyable than filming these podcasts. So I'm happy to be back.
And today we're joined by another very special guest who is a Sky Sports commentator who's followed the Premier League, the Women's Super League. He's been all over the world. It's Mr. Gary Taphouse. Thank you ever so much for joining us.
Hi guys, how are you doing? All right?
Yes, really well, thank you. So we've got a little tradition, which is going to be a change in tradition, but you're going to be the final person who does it this time. The first two people we've spoken to is Mr. John Murray and Charlie Slater, both 5 Live, and who've been excellent. And we have started off each show by asking them what their favourite film is and what their favourite song is, just so we can get to know you a little bit better and those listening can get to know you a little bit better. Do you need a second to think, or are you kind of off the cuff?
Yeah, God, that is tough. I mean, I'm a big psychological horror fan. That would be my film of choice. So I'd probably go for something like Misery. That's a sort of avenue I go down film wise. And then songs, that is just so tough because I just like so much music, and my favorite song would just change all the time. If I had to pick something off the top of my head, it would probably be some track from my uni days, I'd imagine, that I've listened to thousands and thousands of times. Whether or not I would say it's my favorite song, I don't know. Maybe something by Feeder. That's the sort of tracks I would listen to most, probably. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the sort of thing I like.
How about has there been anything you've been listening to a lot recently in specifics, or?
But the funny thing is, because I've got kids, I tend to listen to a lot of chart music. So there's a lot of stuff around at the moment that I really like because it tends to be on in the car. Whether or not if I can tell you who it's actually by or what it's called is another matter. So yeah, I like a lot of current stuff because it tends to just be playing, not necessarily because I would necessarily pick it. But if you looked at my favorite tracks on Deezer, there's probably about 600, and probably 400 or 500 of them are probably stuff that's been around in the last 5 years. So that's simply because they've been going round and round in my head so much. So yeah, that hopefully gives you an idea.
It does. Thank you very much. I think that's really interesting. We've got a nice broad range. We've got, I believe, John Murray's favourite film was Casablanca, something that we hadn't seen. Charlie Slater's was Godfather Part 2.
Yeah, good choice.
And then we've got psychological horrors with Misery. I like this. I like the broad range. I'm a big fan. So, well, thank you very much for that one. We'll kind of delve into the stuff that, we're here to talk to you about, which is really interesting. Obviously, you are a Premier League commentator, which is incredibly exciting, and obviously not just the Premier League either. Looking at last season just gone, incredibly tight battle at the top end of the season between Manchester City and Arsenal, kind of came down to the wire in that sense. This year, how do we think it's going to go at the top end? Are we seeing another tight battle between City and Arsenal? Is Chelsea going to delve in and come through? Are Liverpool fighting for the title?
Well, they'll all start with that thought and that ambition. Whether or not they're likely to actually challenge is another matter. Obviously, Chelsea have made another big change. I'm sure they've got more business to do as well. I think Enzo Maresca is obviously a bit of a gamble, having watched a lot of Leicester last season, because I cover EFL a lot for Sky. If you talk to a lot of Leicester fans, and I know a few, they got quite frustrated towards the sort of second half of last season, and particularly towards the end, because I think they felt that teams had worked them out a little bit and there wasn't really a plan B. Obviously, he got the job done. He got Leicester promoted. That was the aim. So it's going to be interesting to see how he approaches that Chelsea job, what system he favours, how flexible he is. If he gets that right, then you look at the Chelsea squad and there's no reason why they shouldn't be challenging. But of course, they were so far behind last season. It's very difficult to make a case for them being anything other than, challenging for the top four. That'll probably be their aim. Liverpool, again, totally unknown quantity, new manager. A manager who's coming with a great reputation for playing brilliant football, which is what Liverpool want, but challenging for the title in your first season, that's a big ask, isn't it? So the likelihood is it is likely to be between those same two at the moment, but obviously a lot can change in the market.
Definitely, and obviously we were talking before about the Man City allegations, and I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that or any ideas how that may affect the title race this year, because I heard somewhere that they're coming to fruition in November. So maybe.
Yeah, the honest answer there is we don't know. We don't know what the outcome's going to be. We don't know what any sanction, if they are guilty, might be. So it's just impossible to speculate. But it's obviously going to have an effect. At some stage, we're going to find out what the outcome is, but obviously it's then going to be, if something happens, then there'll be appeals and legal battles, and who knows how long it could all go on for. So I've got no idea. I don't think anyone's got any idea at the moment.
Do you have any idea what you think the punishment should be, or?
No, because although we know the charges, we don't know if they're going to be found guilty of them. So. I think if anyone's going to speculate, it's a bit irresponsible, to be honest. But nice try.
It's a difficult one because obviously you can't assume guilty or not guilty either way.
No.
It's a difficult one to navigate. So looking at the teams coming into the Premier League, also you've got the teams like Ipswich that have just come up, which is everybody, I don't think there's anybody really who dislikes the fact Ipswich have just come up, unless they, Ipswich rivals. Even people who don't have no affiliation with them are thinking, I'm quite chuffed Ipswich have got there. The same way people were happy when Luton got up there. How do we think they're going to handle the jump up, do you think? Because you'll have seen them in the Championship, you'll be seeing them in the Premier League this season. How do we think that's going to correlate?
Yeah, I saw a lot of Ipswich last season and was very grateful for that, because there weren't many boring Ipswich Town games last season, as I'm sure you know. And I do have a couple of Ipswich games towards the start of the season, actually. They're going to Brighton away and Southampton away. And as I'm based on the South Coast, I'm doing both of those games. I'm really looking forward to it. I think they've been quite ambitious, don't you? I mean, they haven't been shy of adding to what I think is a pretty good squad. I mean, I think it's a better squad than Luton had when they came up. The football they played last season was absolutely brilliant. And if I looked at the top 5 games that I covered last season, there'd certainly be a couple of Ipswich games in there. So I've got really high hopes for them, actually. I think they've got a brilliant manager, fantastic coach. He really is. And the players love him, and they really buy into what he's trying to do. And obviously, for them and Southampton, really, the style of play that they want, and they're going to stick rigidly to those principles, and rightly so, they're going to get the odd pumping, because that's the nature of the Premier League. But the question is, will they get enough positive results to get over the line? And I've just got a feeling that Ipswich will. I really do, because I know people have questioned them defensively, and I do get that. But I think they're going to score goals. I like the business they've done so far, and I think there'll be more. And I think it's remarkable that a lot of the team is the same as it was in League One. It will be the same again as it was in the Championship, very much like Southampton did when they came up through 2 divisions, 12 years ago. So yeah, I've got really high hopes for them. And I'm really going to enjoy watching them. I think people will be, if you didn't watch them in the Championship last season, you're going to be really pleasantly surprised by how they play, the atmosphere at Portman Road. It's really old school, but also just the way they're on the front foot. They're not going to go out and just try and defend. That's not in Kieran McKenna's nature. So like I say, I think they won't keep many clean sheets, but I think they'll still get plenty of wins.
You mentioned you're from the South Coast. Do you support a team in the Premier League at the moment, or?
Well, I do, but I'm not going to tell you who it is. I live on the South Coast. I'm not from the South Coast. I've lived all over the country. I actually went to university here in Bournemouth and went back home after uni. And I always said, I'm going to come back and live there because I loved it so much. And it took a long time, but 7 years ago, I persuaded my family to move down to the South Coast, and we've never regretted it. It's a brilliant place to live. And obviously, it actually coincided with Bournemouth themselves getting promoted to the Premier League for the first time under Eddie Howe. So I kind of got given a lot of Bournemouth home games, which is fine because I'm 2 miles from the stadium, which is great. And I will do a lot of Bournemouth home games over the course of the season, and it's great. Again, a team that, particularly under the new manager, you know how they want to play, and he knows they're going to lose some games, and they might lose them heavily. But look what happened when they went 3-0 down to Luton. There was never any danger in their mind they were going to lose that game. They just went all out, and he just threw on forwards, and they scored 4 goals. So that's, so following them as I do, in terms of commentary, because I get given a lot of Bournemouth games. I'm not a Bournemouth fan. It is brilliant. So, and it means I'm home by 5:30. So for a 3 o'clock kickoff. So there's a double bonus for you.
Yeah, I live on the South Coast as well. I live down in Brighton, and it's unreal down here, isn't it?
Well, I do a lot of Brighton games as well, obviously, because that's only a hour and a half along the coast. And as I say, I'll be there for that Brighton Ipswich game. Very much looking forward to it. So yeah, I'll do a lot of Brighton. I'll do a lot of Southampton. Looking at my rota for August and September, I've got a couple of Portsmouth home games. Obviously, they're back in the Championship now. West London's easy for me as well. I've got a Brentford game. I've got a couple of curveballs in there. I've got a game up in Harrogate in League Two, and a Barnsley game as well on a Saturday night at 7:45. Because the new EFL deal means there's lots of games at lots of times, and more games than ever. So it's going to be a really busy season, covering a lot of teams which I haven't covered before. And bring it on, because variety is the spice of life, guys.
That's so interesting. So at the start of the season, as a commentator, you just get a list of every single game you're going to commentate, and then that's just your list.
So with this new EFL deal, obviously they're trying to sort out the live games as early as they can to make life easy for fans. So we know all the live games up to the end of September, and then it won't be long until we know October as well. So I've got all my games up till the end of September, and then quite soon I'll know up to the end of October as well. So I've got I've got my first 9 live Sky games, and then I'll have a few more in a few weeks' time. And obviously I do other stuff as well. So I'll be doing Carabao Cup for the World Feed. I'll do the Champions League for the World Feed, the Europa League for the World Feed as well. So a real variety of competitions.
And we're back. Sorry for the disruption there. We've now got Gary on a much bigger screen. So if you're watching on YouTube, you'll be able to see much better. So as we were saying, you just said about the EFL's new deal, which means you're going to cover a lot of different games and a lot of teams that you haven't seen before. Is there any sort of team that you're really excited about seeing, or anyone that you want to go and see that maybe you haven't watched before?
Well, I think it's all about going to grounds that you haven't worked at before. That's the real excitement of this new deal. I only started working live on the EFL during the pandemic, actually, because if you remember, we had a lot more games on TV at that time, and they needed more people. So I was very lucky to be asked to do some games behind closed doors, and thankfully that's continued once we've got back to normal. So I've the last few years I've gone to a lot of grounds that I might have been to as an away fan, but not actually worked at. So that's been brilliant. So just want to keep ticking those off, really, because they're all different. You know, some newer stadiums really had TV in mind when they were designed, so the gantries are in great places. Some of the older ones sort of crowbarred in, maybe taking some seats or overhanging from the roof. So there's lots of variation. I did Crawley in the playoffs, obviously at the end of the season, and yeah, the gantry was so tiny that we couldn't fit on it. They could fit 2 cameras, but they said if you go on it as well with the COCOM, you won't be able to see the goals because the cameras will be blocking you. So they basically had to put us in some seats in amongst the fans. And if you watch the broadcast, you can see us, and the fans are just celebrating when they score all around us. We had to sort of stand up to be able to see what was going on. So that was a great experience. And that's happened to me in radio as well. When I worked for TalkSport, I did a game, an FA Cup game, Newport against Leicester. And we were just in some seats that fans sit in. It wasn't like a special broadcast area. And it was really amazing. You really felt like you were in the thick of it, just with the fans. So although, you know, it has its disadvantages because they can hear everything you're saying and they might not like what you're saying. They might say, well, actually, I didn't agree with what you said there about the team or that particular player. So sometimes we get a bit of a debrief at half time saying, well, I wasn't sure about that. But I absolutely love working on the EFL. Probably more than I ever thought I would, to be honest. It's such a fantastic experience, and the clubs just love having you there. There's a big difference between the Premier League and the EFL in that respect. Obviously, the Premier League is such a huge beast, and it's just taken for granted that every game is going to be on TV. If not in the UK, then overseas. But with the EFL, it is different. You know, the cameras aren't at every game. It's going to be different this season because the Championship is going to have an OB at every match. But you know, further down, it's not the case. And so yeah, it's a really nice experience going to a League Two game, for example. So when I go to Harrogate and then Barnsley in division above in the first couple of months, I'm really looking forward to those games.
Yeah, sounds very good. I was just out of interest. Have you done many games in and around outside of England, or do you do games strictly with the Premier League and the EFL?
Well, it's fitting them in.
Yeah,
I did 130 games last season, and believe me, it's not the games that takes the time; it's the travelling and the prep. And I always say to people, 80% of my job is either sitting behind the wheel of a car, or it's sitting in front of this laptop prepping. And actually the games is the other 20% is the fun bit. But most of my time is taken up with prepping and traveling. So physically fitting in anymore, I think would be impossible, to be honest. And I wouldn't be able to do justice to the games I'm doing because you have to put in the work in order to do a good broadcast. You can't just rock up. I think a lot of people do think we do that sometimes. You know, they'll say, what do you do the rest of the week? And the reality is I might have a game Saturday, have another game Tuesday, maybe Wednesday, Thursday in a European week, then Saturday, then maybe Sunday, maybe a Friday night crowbarred in as well, because again, new EFL deal, you're going to have a live League One or League Two game every Thursday night. There's going to be live Championship every Friday night. There'll be games Saturday and Sunday. There'll be another one Monday night. There'll be midweek games as well. You know, 7 days a week, there's going to be matches now. Some of them on the main channel, some of them on the new streaming service, SkySports Plus. But then I'm also working on European games, cup games. So fitting in other leagues is a challenge. You know, when Sky had MLS, I worked on that for a while, and I've really enjoyed that. But again, crazy kickoff times. Obviously, we didn't go to America to do them. We were doing them from London, and they might kick off at 3 a.m. So you don't really get to go to bed before the game, and there's not much point going to bed after them. So I don't miss those mad kickoff times, that's for sure.
would there be a dream stadium to go and commentate in that you haven't?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, you've just seen the Euros. I mean, I think the Dortmund Stadium is amazing. And again, I haven't worked there, but I would very much like to. I think that's top of the list. I have worked at a lot of the big stadiums in Europe, which I've wanted to. I was very lucky that when I worked at Chelsea Football Club, we covered every game home and away, and that includes Europe. So, you know, we did a lot of trips to Barcelona and Milan and Prague, and, you know, huge stadiums all around Europe. It was an amazing experience. I don't know if anyone was listening to us, but we had a great time. You know, that was a real joy, because we traveled with the team as well. So we were on the same flight as the players, and, you know, staying in the hotel. And we were quite lucky. I was with Kerry Dixon, who of course is one of the club's leading all-time scorers, and we didn't really have a lot to do other than the game. And sometimes you might go 3 days before. So it was kind of just a nice sort of sightseeing trip, and then a football match tagged on the end of it. So, yeah, those were great days.
I'm going to say that sounds pretty ideal, that sort of holiday. I mentioned a few minutes ago the amount of prep that you do is 80% of your job. It's pretty much preparing. What I'd like to know is, if you've said about working on TalkSport, but then obviously you do football commentary as well. Is the prep different for a radio commentary compared to a football commentary?
I probably do more for TV, if I'm honest, and the reason for that is, and I'm sure John would have mentioned this, that when you're on the radio, most of your job is describing who's got the ball and where the ball is. Now, obviously, on TV, people can see that. So you've got to add value to the broadcast that isn't obvious. And I think, you know, when I first moved into TV, I made the classic mistake that a lot of commentators made of talking too much and thinking to yourself, well, I'm being paid to talk, so I need to talk. And I've just come from a radio background where I would talk non-stop because you can't leave any silences. And actually doing TV is a totally different skill. And, you know, you learn over time that actually saying nothing is sometimes the right thing to do for quite a long time. You know, because if if we are all at a football match, you haven't got commentary in your ears. You know, you're just watching the match and enjoying it. And a lot of people watching at home want to have that same experience. So you only talk when you need to talk. And I think it took me a long time to really understand that. So the prep I do, 80% of it I won't use, but you've got to have it just in case. So I have basically 23 bits of information on every single player, just in case. You don't know what's going to happen during the game, whether they're going to unexpectedly score their first goal for 8 years, or are they going to get sent off for the first time in their career? You know, you need to know this stuff, but you probably won't use it. And so, you know, a lot of the time you'll be researching stuff or preparing stuff thinking, well, I'm never going to use this. But if you don't do it, the one time you don't do it is the one time you'll need it. So I'll do a full day's prep for any game, but knowing full well that the likelihood is the vast majority of it I won't need. And, you know, a lot of people accuse commentators of using stats too much. I don't like to use huge numbers of stats, but if I do use them, I want to make sure that they are actually interesting and relevant. And you'll see on Sky, we use a lot of the corner boxes, the red corner boxes in the EFL. And we'll work together, me and the producer and the director and the co-com, to make sure that that goes in at the right time, so it's relevant to what's just happened, and that we're all on the same page and we've all got the same stats. And that way we're trying to enhance the broadcast rather than just throwing a stat in for the sake of it, which again is another mistake I made when I first started. And I read the great Barry Davis's book, and he said when he first started, he would have a list of stats and he would make it his mission to get them all in over the course of 90 minutes. And he realized that actually that's not the point of a stat. It's to actually be relevant and enhance what's happening on the screen, not to just fill time. So I always say that commentary is a job where it doesn't matter how many games you've done, and I've done thousands, you're always learning, you're always improving, and you're always understanding more what the audience wants. I think if you think you've cracked it, then you're wrong, basically, because we're all learning all the time.
For us, we're not, obviously it's not the exact same job, but similarly we are talking over and talking to people. Would you have any quick bit of knowledge you could give to us to help us on our long starting journey of commentary as well? Just like a quick, like what something you've done you think would really help us along?
Well, there's so many tips I could give you, but I think the first thing is always talk to the people involved. It's, you know, it's not just about what you've written on your laptop. The best bits of information are going to come from the people you talk to. So this is why we always get to games hours in advance. We will always talk to the managers if we can, even if it's just 2 minutes. You know, they always do a pre-match interview on TV. I will sort of hover around that area. And then when they finish that, I'll just, you know, they might know me or they might vaguely recognize me, and I'll just go and introduce myself again and just say, you know, we're doing the game today. Just wanted to ask you a couple of questions. And then, you know, those things that he said to you in those 2 minutes can be really valuable during the game. Or you might talk to some of the players when they come off. You know, I sometimes talk to a player just to confirm how they pronounce their name, because that's the most important thing we need to know, as any commentator needs to know, is how they pronounce their own name. And once you've done that, you might be able to just say, you know, how's training going? How's your fitness? And that is more valuable than anything that you study beforehand. So that's always the first tip. Try and talk to as many people involved, and talk to journalists and reporters and commentators who watch the teams every week, because they're going to have opinions on, you know, who's playing well, who's not playing well, who maybe needs a chance from the bench, who's taking really good set pieces at the moment. You know, your first corner comes in and you can say, oh, well, talking to someone who's covering this team every week, he's been taking some fantastic corners recently. Let's see how this one goes, you know? So that's adding to the pictures. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, you know, that the homework is so important. And like I said, it can be a bit of a thankless task because you do so much and most of it you won't use. But I will always make an effort to read interviews that the managers or players have done, not even just that week, but actually going back a bit as well, just to get a sense of how things have developed over the last few months. I think that's really important. Use the press officers at the clubs as well, because they're there to help, and they will give you little bits of information which can be so handy. And obviously different press officers have a different way of doing the job. Some are much more helpful than others. But I think that's really, really useful. And then the best bit of advice I can give any commentator is, when you've finished, don't listen back to it straight away. Do some other games. Listen back after 3 months, so that you're listening to it as someone completely fresh. I never watch any of my games back straight away, but I might listen back to some highlights from a game from a year ago, because I won't remember the game. I'll have done 130 games since. I won't remember who scored or what the score was. And I'm basically listening to it as a viewer. And I think to myself, what do I like about that? And what do I not like? Why did I say that? Or why didn't I say that? And that way you can sort of evaluate your own progress, and you're sort of listening to it with fresh ears, even though it's your own voice. You might be surprised at what you said or didn't say. And I found that to be a really useful tool. If you're just listening to something you did that day, then you know what's coming. So it's kind of pointless. But listening to older stuff, you're listening to it as a viewer, and that can be really, really useful. And I also get my wife to tell me if she thinks I'm rubbish, and most of the time she says I am. So she's a really good critic.
Like I said, they'll always tell the truth, no matter if you want to hear it or not.
Exactly right. But you know, sometimes you need that, because
100%.
feedback in this industry is hard to come by, and good and bad. And that's why when people come to me and say, can you have a listen to my commentary, or could you have a look at my CV, I'm really, really happy to do it, because it's very, very difficult to get honest feedback. And sometimes people don't want to hear it, by the way. I might tell them and they're like, oh, and I never hear from them again. But I think it's really important to get that, really important.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. I think feedback's one of the sort of the driving factors in how you progress, especially in this sort of industry. Speaking of this industry, and obviously you've been in this industry for a long, long time. I think I read 2005 you joined Sky Sports. Is that right?
Yeah, that's I tried to get in for quite a long time before that, but that's when they eventually caved in, gave me a chance. And I did, for the first couple of years, I didn't do very much. But yeah, so I think for the first 3 years, I probably did maybe a dozen games, and it was only later on that I managed to persuade them to use me more. Yeah, so it's been nearly 20 years.
So a long time in the industry, and you've done, like you've said, thousands and thousands of games and all sorts of competitions. But the industry itself is a difficult place to get into. You can't just apply on Indeed. So I'd like to know sort of your path, how you first got yourself into sports media.
Well, my own path is kind of irrelevant because it doesn't exist anymore, sadly. I came in through a local commercial radio route via Capital Gold. I worked for Jonathan Pearce, like many people in our industry did. So, people who you'll know, like Steve Wilson from Match of the Day, Ian Crocker, who does the Scottish football. Oh gosh, there's so many. They all came through that Capital Gold route, and it's really sad that local commercial radio kind of died a death in terms of sport. So a lot of people now are becoming club commentators, doing, first of all, maybe even doing stuff in non-league for free, because when I finished uni, I started working for Crystal Palace. I was living in South London. And I started working on their club radio station completely for free. And I was doing long hours there on a Saturday. But I was funding that by working on a local newspaper Monday to Friday. So I knew there was kind of a means to an end here. I didn't want to be a written journalist, but I knew I had to have the experience under my belt if I was going to be taken seriously. So Monday to Friday, I'd be, talking about machete attacks in East Croydon Station. And then during the weekend, I'd be reporting on, I'd be going to Crystal Palace home games and not any commentating, but interviewing and goodness knows what. So that then led on to other things, because I'd be sitting near other reporters and broadcasters from other channels, and I got talking to them, and it led on to other opportunities. So eventually the opportunity came up to join Chelsea, which that coincided with Abramovich buying the club and Mourinho coming in, and this explosion of media interest. And I got to know the people from Sky, and that's how I got working for Sky. So the moral of all of that is, any opportunities that come along, you've got to grasp them. You really have. And you've got to talk to people. That's how you get on in this industry, not by sending messages and emails, but by actually talking to people. And I think, as I say, I've got kids myself. I think this sort of current generation are reluctant to pick up the phone and actually talk to people. But that is how I got that job at Sky. I was given the producer's number by another commentator, and they said, this is the guy that's doing Match Choice, call him up. And I was like, oh my God, I've got to actually speak to him. When's a good time to phone someone's mobile? You don't know, do you? And I was really, really nervous making that call, but it's that personal connection. He heard my voice straight away. And I think if I had just tried badgering on email, it wouldn't have got anywhere, to be perfectly honest. So make those personal connections. That's what's going to really help you in this industry.
Definitely. Do you remember when you first wanted to be a commentator? Because it doesn't strike me as something, me personally, anyway, when I was a child, I don't remember ever thinking that I wanted to be a football commentator. I just wondered, do you remember what first put you on that path or anything?
Well, Sam, you obviously weren't a nerd, were you? I remember very clearly when it was. I'm really showing my age here, guys, but it was Italia 90 World Cup when I was a teenager. And it was the first major tournament where I watched every game. And I became as fascinated by the broadcast itself as the actual match. And, you know, the idea that these people actually earned a living by commentating on football, I just thought was unbelievable. And I said to my dad, that's what I want to do. And, you know, I think my parents were just like, yeah, that's never going to happen. But I really, really made it my mission. And as I've described to you, I had some very fortunate breaks along the way, but you've got to grasp those opportunities. That's what I'm saying. If you can sense an opportunity, you've got nothing to lose by going for it and giving it your all. And if nothing comes of it, then at least you've tried. And believe me, I've had my fair share of knockbacks as well. But, you know, and it was a very long road from me being a 15-year-old watching Italia 90 to actually earning a good living from commentating on TV. You know, that took the best part of 15 years. So, you know, no one only half-heartedly wants to be a commentator. It needs to be a burning passion, because it's incredibly difficult to get into and incredibly competitive. And it does need to be something that you desperately want to do if you're going to succeed.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you very much. I think we're kind of coming towards the end of our little conversation, and it's been brilliant having you on. Is there anything that you'd like to add? Anything you'd like to leave us with before we go, in terms of the media, in terms of your career, in terms of football, in anything at all? Is there anything
of course. Well, look, you know, you may well know that I do like to mentor people in the industry. If you follow me on social media, you know I post jobs every single day in sport media. And that's kind of snowballed over the years. I started that 9-10 years ago, and it's gone crazy now. I've gone over 12,000 job posts on my Twitter account, X account. And every single day I get employers messaging me directly saying, can you put this out there? And a lot of the time it's because the person that filled that job previously saw it on my feed. So it has really sort of taken on a life of itself. And actually some of the ads I post are exclusive to my feed. They're not even adverts, because I've got such a big following of people that are interested in the industry, that they know they don't have to spending a fortune on advertising. They can just get me to tweet it out, and they'll get a load of really well qualified people. So if you're not following me and you're interested in the industry, please do, because that's something I do every single day. And like I said, a lot of my messages are full of people saying, you know, have you got any advice for my specific situation? Would you mind listening to my show reel? Would you mind having a look at my CV? And obviously I can't help every single person because it's a full-time job, but I always reply, and I'll always do my best. So if anyone does want to get in touch with me, then, you know, you can message me on there, and I'll be very happy to get in touch.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Yes, I know about your X account. I'm a follower, and believe me, all of my bookmarks on X are just your ads.
Brilliant. Well, honestly, my message is, it's really uplifting, actually, because I will get a lot of people who've said, I just want you to know I've got this job, and I got it because I saw it on your feed. And obviously I always say, well, look, I didn't do anything. I just put it out there. You did the hard work. But it's great to know that it's because they're all in one place. That's what I wanted, was to try and build something so that you could see all the opportunities in one place rather than having to do constant searches. So yeah, it's worked out really well. And I think I'm happy to say it's helped a fair number of people. And I do mentor through the John Schofield Trust as well. So, you know, I've mentored about half a dozen people. I'm always happy to take on more if commentary or working in sports broadcasting is something that you're really interested in, and you just need that extra bit of help, then you know, I usually do have 1 or 2 spaces. So again, get in touch with me.
Spot on.
Right. That's brilliant. Thank you ever so much. And we'll bring it to a close. So thank you very much for joining us, Gary. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. And hopefully this won't be the last time we speak with you. Sam, thank you very much for joining me again today after your hiatus last week. And thank you again. And we'll see you all soon.